Thank you, councillors. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call this Committee of the Whole, the workshop meeting of February 15th, 2023 to order. My name is Sandra Easton, Mayor and Chair of the Committee of the Whole workshop. We have a couple of members who are late this evening. However, the balance of council are here, as you can see. And we also have senior staff in attendance. Also in attendance, we have the following guests. John Dunn, who is the project consultant and founder of Floor 13, welcome. And Pat Kelly, who is the project consultant and founder of Floor 13. And they are the consultants who have assisted with the preparation of this workshop. And also this evening, and I see that not everybody is here, but I'm going to name the names off, and I want to thank you all in advance for coming. It's great to have support from the industry and from the different sectors. We'll have Alan Schmidt, the president of Vineland Estate Winery. Sue-Ann Staff is here. Thanks, Sue-Ann, the president of Sue-Ann Staff Estate Winery. Norm Beale is coming from Peninsula Ridge Estates Winery. Stephen Demora is here. Thank you, Steve, from B&E Estates Winery. Gianpaolo Raviali, the owner of B&E Estates Winery, isn't here, but I'm sure that Steve will be able to represent the whole team. Matt Giffen is here. He's the founder of Bench Brewery. Heidi Fielding is here, owner-operator Fielding Estates. Stephanie Hicks is the interim executive director of the 20 Valley Tourism Association, and she's also the executive director of the Downtown Bench Beamsville BIA. And Karen Doyle is the tourism marketing officer of the City of St. Catharines. Karen, I'm going to ask you to stand up just because you may not be a person that everyone has met. Thanks very much for coming out, Karen. We're happy to have our partnership with the City of St. Catharines. And many of you will know Alan Schmidt. I think Alan came in and he's in the front. Thank you very much. So thank you all very much for coming. We're happy to have so many of our partners present. Councillors, are there any declarations of interest? There being none, we'll move on then to the regular agenda, and we're now considering item 4.1, which is a presentation regarding building a stronger visitor economy for Lincoln, a collaborative approach to developing a joint destination marketing organization. And as I mentioned before, we have John C. Dunn and Pat Kelly, project consultants and founders of Floor 13, joining us and providing a presentation alongside our Director of Economic Development and Communications and Tourism Coordinator, Paul Diani and Brittany Beluski. So, Paul, would you please come up and get this rolling? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good afternoon, members of council and members of our corporate leadership team. We're pleased to be here this afternoon to present our vision on how to build a strong visitor economy for the town of Lincoln. As many of you know, we have been hard at work developing a plan on how to build a joint destination marketing organization with our friends in the City of St. Catharines, as we see a benefit of a shared service model when it comes to destination marketing. This shared service model will benefit both communities, as it will allow us to pool resources, combine the best attributes of our two communities, and to increase tourism visitation. And lastly, help grow our tourism economy through investment attraction, job creation, and supporting our local businesses. Staff wanted to present this information in a workshop format for council because it will allow us to have a much more fulsome and informal discussion so that we can lay out our vision. We look forward, of course, to your questions. In addition, we have some tourism stakeholders from our community that have asked to be a part of this session, and we will look forward to hearing them in a little bit. As Madam Mayor mentioned, we have Karen Doyle from the City of St. Catharines, and we appreciate her being here to provide her support for this project. The clerk, of course, has asked me to inform everyone this evening that in this workshop format, of course, no council decisions are being made. Rather, it is a chance to help educate and inform both those in the room and, of course, those watching from home. So regarding our agenda, both Brittany and I will be discussing and answering a few questions. Mainly, what are the steps throughout the process that got us to where we are today? Providing a bit of a tourism snapshot, and of course, highlighting the importance of our local visitor economy here in Lincoln. John and Pat will be walking us through the vision of a collaborative approach to a new DMO, and then we'll be hearing from some of our stakeholders to provide highlights on what this DMO means for their local businesses. And lastly, of course, as I mentioned, we'll have a good Q&A. I do know that we have a hard stop at 6:30, so we're going to go a little bit quickly through the slides, but that will allow us to have a good formal discussion and Q&A. So I know John, when he comes up, is going to give a little bit of an introduction to himself, but I would like to introduce both Pat and John from Floor 13, who have been helping us throughout this process. Both John and Pat, and if they'll allow me to say, are a little bit of rock stars when it comes to the tourism consulting world, and collectively have over 65 years of tourism experience between the two of them. And John tells me they started when they were about 10 years old, so. So their expertise and guidance are highly sought after, and of course their specialty is working on DMO structures, among many things. So they look just as good in the pictures as they do in person. And of course, there's some of their relevant work experience. So, how did we get here? On this slide, we wanted to highlight the process by which we got here today. As we do have a new member of council, Councillor Murray, we felt that it was important to give a little bit of a history lesson as it will help inform our discussion this evening. So back in 2017, as the town's first ever economic development officer, we kickstarted an economic development strategy process to help identify our strengths, our weaknesses, as well as the best opportunities for economic growth in our community. Highlighted in that strategy was that tourism, agriculture, and value-added agriculture represents our greatest opportunity for economic growth. The strategy, which Council passed in 2018 for the 5-year period beginning in 2019, highlighted the need to develop a tourism strategy. In 2019, we immediately began working on a tourism strategy for Lincoln, which Council approved in June of 2020, that answered the overarching questions: what is the town's role in tourism? The answer: towns should play a larger role in managing the overarching destination. We should develop a new tourism brand for the community. We should continue with a third-party DMO to help drive destination marketing. We should bring in other public and private sector partners to fund and manage the DMO. And lastly, we should transition the 20 Valley Tourism Association, the TVTA, to this new organization. In September of 2020, we signed an MOU with the City of St. Catharines to combine our efforts to support tourism-based businesses throughout the pandemic. As you can imagine, throughout the pandemic, tourism and hospitality were one of the hardest hit sectors. In addition, our MOU called for us to jointly investigate the development of a joint DMO to support our two communities. In October of 2021, Council approved the new destination brand for the community as the Niagara Benchlands. And in November, December of 2021, we began working with John and Pat on this project, and that included extensive consultation. So overarching, we're at the final stages of this long but rewarding process. We have done steps 11 through 12, and hopefully at the end of this, we'll be able to move forward with this new plan. So what is our overarching goal? Our goal is to grow our economy, create jobs and wealth for our residents. We are a Greenbelt community with fixed urban boundaries. Unless the province were to remove portions of our land from the Greenbelt to allow us to build a second industrial park, our greatest opportunity for economic growth is through tourism and value-added agriculture. In addition, with the investment in tourism and hospitality comes investment in other places in our community. Downtown investment and beautification, industrial investment, and more investment in accommodations and retail. Tourism in our community is the catalyst for further investment and economic growth. Lastly, by supporting value-added agriculture and tourism here in Lincoln, it protects our rural lands. With all the land use planning changes from the province, I think it's important to make that point. So making the case for tourism. So employment growth in tourism and hospitality in our community is up 11% since 2015. Tourism contributes $2.4 billion to our regional and local economy. And at the base level, we have 1,700 tourism-related jobs here in Lincoln. That's the base. When you get to the high season periods, obviously those numbers grow exponentially, and also that doesn't include migrant workers that work our farms. This also does not include the tourism value chains we have here in Lincoln, such as retail, industrial jobs, commercial, things that support tourism. So to continue, the tourism and hospitality businesses here in Lincoln pay $3 million a year when it comes to property taxes. They create jobs, they bring investors, and they bring in visitors that spend money in our community. The people behind me that are here this evening, they work and live in Lincoln. They are taxpayers. When visitors come to Lincoln, they shop at our stores. They fill up at our gas stations. They eat at our restaurants. They shop and frequent our commercial districts. In economic development terms, we talk about clusters. The tourism hospitality cluster here in Lincoln has roots even in our industrial park. Central Fabricating is a local manufacturing company that supports the beverage manufacturing sector here in Lincoln. So back in November, a few members of council and staff, we toured Central Fab, and they indicated that 60% of their business supports the beverage and manufacturing sector. So as you can see, the cluster around tourism and hospitality permeates our entire local economy. That $3 million number doesn't factor in our super clusters, the gas stations, the industrial-based businesses, the commercial, the retail. So a new destination marketing organization, marketing the Niagara Benchlands as a great destination to visit, will grow our economy and our non-residential tax base, which, if I can put it in one sentence, of course, is the goal of economic development. So at this point, I'm going to turn over to Brittany to talk a little bit about our key competitive advantages.
Thank you, Mr. Deaney. Good afternoon, Mayor Easton, councillors, tourism stakeholders, and friends joining from home, as well as our corporate leadership team. The viability and economic impact of Lincoln's tourism industry can't be understated or overstated or underestimated in today's discussion. This sector is unequivocally Lincoln's greatest opportunity for economic growth, job creation, and continued prosperity. After all, we are a place to grow, a place to prosper, and a place to belong. As noted on the slide here, prior to the pandemic, the Niagara region was welcoming over 12.95 million visitors to the region annually, accounting for over $2.4 billion in direct visitor expenditure here in Niagara. Knowing the overall demand for the Niagara experience, we, the town of Lincoln, need to meet the demands of the emerging post-pandemic tourist and understand that we need to take far more of a multifaceted approach if we intend to sustainably grow our visitor economy and leverage those key competitive advantages you see on the screen that Lincoln has to offer. These competitive advantages are no surprise to anyone around the table today or the stakeholders behind me. Our proximity to the GTA and Golden Horseshoe is a license for us to continue prosperity here in Lincoln. We have feeder markets directly driving through our destination and not stopping, and there's a reason for that. We have only done half of the work currently to help promote our destination. By bringing in a well-heeled, well-funded destination marketing organization, we can truly leverage the work that town staff and town has invested in the new Niagara Benchlands destination brand. Now, the town of Lincoln and city of St. Catharines are truly the natural gateways to this Niagara region. We offer an amazing complementary experience of both world-class urban as well as authentic rural experiences. So as we together go with the City of St. Catharines in efforts to support our local stakeholders through rapid recovery from the harsh effects of the COVID pandemic, we need to ensure that we are promoting, championing, and leveraging these unique assets in both of our destinations for continued and hurried economic growth. Council, it's no surprise to you, and Paul already noted this, on October 18th, we were very fortunate to have your unanimous support in adopting the Niagara Benchlands as Lincoln's new destination identity. As we know, a strong tourism destination brand allows a community to shape and increase its economic opportunities for both residents as well as businesses alike. A strong destination brand creates the compelling commercial advantages, communicates why people should visit your community and your locations, why you should open a business in a place like Lincoln or even invest your money here. By activating our strong Niagara Benchlands destination brand, we leveraged Lincoln's key competitive advantages, which we know are craft beverage, value-added agriculture, wide open spaces, our welcoming communities, and celebrate these differences as a point of distinction directly in differentiation from fellow like-minded destination competitors like Niagara-on-the-Lake, Prince Edward County, and Stratford. With early successes that this team has seen with the adoption of the Niagara Benchlands brand, the overwhelming support we've received from our tourism-based businesses in our community, the time is now, Council, for us to take the foundation upon which this town staff has built, which our community has championed, and now continue to grow the equity of the Niagara Benchlands brand with the support of a well-funded expert local destination marketing organization for the town of Lincoln. As you know, for approximately 20 years, the town of Lincoln has actually outsourced tourism development to the management of the 20 Valley Tourism Association, which was officially our destination marketing organization in the past, and still currently operating under the supervision of the interim executive director, Stephanie Hicks. After careful consideration, as well as extensive consultation with our industry and local community, we know that Lincoln needs to play a larger role in managing our destination, while allowing private partnerships between the town, City of St. Catharines, our private industry stakeholders, to come together and market the benchlands as a collective destination whole. We as destination managers, the town would continue to lead traditional development and economic development projects such as creating an amazing sense of welcome. You'll see some of the work our staff has done at your new Ontario Street and QEW Gateway. Community beautification projects like the lovely Niagara Benchlands community banners and the chalkboard in downtown Beamsville, which you see. New holiday decor investments to enhance community and beautification and to set the stage for increased tourism activity in Jordan Village. This was a result actually of a partnership between ourselves and our local regional tourism office. Thank you to the Tourism Partnership of Niagara for supporting that project. A well-supported destination marketing organization would then look to leverage that investment that the town has made to set the stage and the foundation for welcoming tourists into our community, and leverage with their expertise a sales and marketing campaign, for instance, to drive visitor spending and increase that day tripper into an overnight accommodator and hopefully into a long-term traveler and brand ambassador for the Benchlands as well. With these informing comments, I'd like to take this time to now turn it over to our project consultants to talk a little bit about the product methodology, the approach, and some of the consultation activities we underwent in order to bring this recommendation forward to council, as well as address, I think, some of the overall recommendations we feel would lead this new destination marketing organization to a level of success that's currently synonymous with the level of expectation of customer service delivery that we expect and provide to our residents and our businesses here in Lincoln. So if I may, Madam Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to John Dunn.
Welcome, John.
Mayor Eastman, thank you. Councillors, senior leadership, thank you very much for having us here today. I'm glad we're going to be talking about tourism, and I want to thank all these tourism stakeholders for being here tonight. My only disappointment is with all these winemakers that we're not going to have a tasting this evening. It's unfortunate, but maybe another time. I want to start off by saying, the problem with tourism is people don't always understand what it's all about. People think of hotels, a couple of attractions, some restaurants, but it is an actual industry. As both Paul and Brittany have talked about, it really falls into so many sectors, but you can't point to it all the time like you would a car plant and say there's 1,000 people that work in that car plant. We have 1,000 people, but there's 10 here, 100 there, 50 there. They're all spread out. So they're really in all sorts of different sectors within the tourism industry. So we like to talk about tourism as an industry, and I think that's an important statement to make, and one that tourism stakeholders are using more and more, so that we really push that message, because we are, as you've seen some of the economic numbers, they're quite significant. So let me jump in here. So really the idea of looking at a two-city DMO makes much more sense. When you look at what's happening within the region, tourism and tourist visitors don't really care where the town boundaries are. They want to come into somewhere. They want to be able to do lots of things over several days. The idea of pushing people to stay longer is much more money at the table. Day visitors are great, but overnight visitors spend anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 times more than a day visitor. So we really want to capture that nighttime visitor. So we want them to stay at least one night, if not more. So the idea of having these two communities work together, where in St. Catherine you've got the great hotel hub where people can stay, and lots of attractions and restaurants where they can spend time and spend money, but also have the Lincoln region where they can come out and do all sorts of different experiences which they can't find in the city. So it's really that hub and spoke type of philosophy we really want to employ with this new DMO. So it's based on looking at what was before, the TVTA, which did a great job over the last 20 years, but I think now it's really taking it to that 2.0, Tourism 2.0 for the region. The mandate was really to look at how we could put in a DMO here, properly funded, sustainably funding over a long period of time, something that's going to stay much longer than most of you councillors around here. Time will pass, but we want this DMO to think long-term. So we want it to be around for quite a while. We want to leverage Niagara region. It's known all over the world. It's one of the top 3 destinations that Europeans and Asians want to see when they come. They talk about Niagara Falls, but there's much more to Niagara Falls, as you all know, in the Niagara region. So we really want to leverage that as well. So when we look at what's the future state of this DMO? Well, again, we want to, as I said, we really want to leverage the Niagara region's worldwide brand. We want to make sure that people recognize that it's a little different here than what they're going to find down the road. So the DMO would leverage St. Catharines' urban feel and vibe, and attracting also with the community of hotels that are there, but also complemented by the royal attractions that we have here, the authentic nature, the craft-based industries. And if there's one thing when we were talking to most of you, or a lot of you and a lot of stakeholders last summer when we were here, that word kept coming up: authentic, authentic, authentic. So when we go see the wineries, the owners are behind the cash register. When we stop at some of the attractions, the owners are behind the cash register. It's not some foreign corporation that doesn't have a face. So really that authenticity, super important here. And I think that's one of those, a lot of people say they're authentic, but I think here people actually live the authenticity of the region. And that goes a long way with visitors, of course. So quickly, I'll talk a little bit how we got to where we are today. So obviously, there was a lot of research. Our firm, Floor 13, has done this type of work throughout Canada, building new DMOs or taking existing DMOs and taking them to the next level. So we had a lot of in-house data we were using. We looked at a lot of competitors here within Ontario, but we looked at best practices right across the country. We looked at how DMOs are funding themselves. So whether it's through a levy, a tax, a DMF, different methods. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. We looked at your bylaws. The past TVTA already had a great set of bylaws, so we took those and kind of re-looked at those and updated them. And of course, we wanted to make sure that this is a good governance around this body, so we'll talk a little bit about that. We came out and spent quite a bit of time out here talking to stakeholders at all levels, both at the municipal level, at the stakeholder level, businesses, economic development agencies, et cetera. We spoke to people online and in person. We sent out a survey. So we had about a little over 100 people come back to us with their opinions on what they thought a new DMO in the region should look like. So some of our recommendations, which we'll talk about today, is really what the structure should look like. So the purpose, the governance, what some of the revenues you could look at, how we should be looking at staff deployment and implementation process. So before we go into that, I just want to point out a couple of best practices because they come back in some of our recommendations, but this is looking at the landscape within Canada. So really the best DMOs out there are well-balanced, industry-led board of directors. And when I say industry-led, I want to really stress that fact because it's so important to have the industry behind this. Yes, it's important to have you at the municipal levels behind this, but I think if the industry is driving it, it implicates everybody. So everybody's got a bit of skin in the game. So that's really, really important. We're seeing that. The boards are usually made up of a majority of industry stakeholders. We want boards that have competency coming to the board level. So yes, they're in the tourism business, but what can they bring more to what can they bring to the board? We want to make sure that they have certain expertise. We want the board to have a really defined mandate, clear bylaws, and of course be accountable to not only other tourism stakeholders, but to everybody involved in the region. As far as funding, well, we got to make sure that they have sustainable and committed core funding. It's not a year-to-year based thing. I think we have to look long-term. Some of these projects, especially on the development side, when we're looking at developing new tourism projects, they take years. So this new DMO has to think in years. So really, it's got to make sure that it's going to be around for a while. And that goes for, marketing plans and everything we do online as well. So yeah, it seems like it's immediate, but we really have to take a long-term vision on tourism. We want to make sure that they have multiple funding sources as well, so they can't just rely on one in case that dries up. And we saw that during the pandemic. It was a real kick in the teeth, obviously, for our industry as a whole. Transparency, a lot of these DMOs have enormous funds, so we want to make sure that it's transparent, timely reporting, and there's oversight on this. We want to make sure this is really on the up and up. And I think you might have seen some recent articles recently in the newspaper about some of your competitors who aren't playing in the same sandbox on this, and I think that's just detrimental to our whole industry, and it's really a minority of people that aren't playing by the rules. On the board side, or on the staff side, we want to make sure we have a client-facing staff. We don't want people hiding in offices. We want to make sure they're talking to stakeholders, that they're talking to our clientele. We want to make sure that they're digitally focused, because the days of brochures are dead. Now we're talking, it's got to be digital. We've got to have people that are super savvy in digital. It moves very quickly. The nice thing about digital, it can be inexpensive and we can change it quite rapidly. Whereas when you print something, you're stuck with it until you have it. We want to make sure that the organization has clear targets and KPIs, so key performance indicators. We want to make sure that we're deploying our staff in the right places and push to the right targets, target markets. And we want to make sure that we're flexible in finding the right people. So it doesn't mean obviously coming into the office every day. It could be a remote person. If we feel that, we need to have somebody in Toronto because that's a place where all our clients are, then maybe that's where that person should be. So we need to be flexible in that way. As far as plans and targets, annual business plan, targeted clientele. So we're not shooting all over the place. We really want to know who we want to talk to, because we've got limited dollars. You're not Toronto, you're not Vancouver, you're not Montreal that have 30, 40, $50 million budgets. So we need to be uber targeted on who we're going to talk to and what we're going to say to them and when we're going to say it to them. We need to be risk tolerant. We need to be able to fail fast. So, let's take some chances. If it doesn't work, let's change gears. Let's move quickly, especially in a new DMO and in a new sort of region that we're putting together. We need to be super flexible on this kind of thing. We want a digital strategy and clear USP. So we want to make sure that we're differentiating ourselves from all the other players in the region, because there's a lot of noise in the Niagara region. So we want to sort of lift ourselves beyond that noise and differentiate ourselves as much as possible. We also want to have a membership organization. So again, we want people to have skin in the game. We want them to commit to tourism. So it's not, maybe I'll participate. Are you in or you out? We really want them to commit. We want to encompass the whole of the industry and the whole of the local community as well. So we want to make sure that the community understands how important tourism, and that's done through the DMO. Before, people didn't really think of tourism as anything special, but I think here we really want to connect because they are an extension of the storytelling for the region. So we want to make sure that the locals are involved. We want a collaborative approach with some of our friends down the road as well, because we are selling the Niagara region. So the idea is to get them into Canada, into Ontario, into the Niagara region, and into Lincoln St. Catharines. So that's how it works. It's a real funnel effect. So we don't want to sort of go off on a tangent when we know that Ontario is not selling in that market or Canada is not going after that market. It's not something we make up along the way. It's really planned out. We need pertinent communications to all stakeholders and locals, as I said, and we need some business intelligence. For all the great things we do in tourism, one of the worst things we do is data collection, because it's so hard to get. But that's one thing that progressive DMOs are doing more and more, is trying to collect more data, because it not only helps the DMO, but it's pushed out to its stakeholders, and it helps them in their own planning to make sure that they're spending their money in the right place. So some of the themes that came out from all those people we spoke to, everybody was really in favor of having a new joint DMO. People understood it made a lot of sense that these two communities get together. They wanted to make sure that the new DMO is focused on marketing, product development, and advocacy for tourism. Wanted to make sure that they were an aggregator and a facilitator, get tourism stakeholders together, get cities together, get all these players together, but not to be the operator or the producer of these things. So yeah, let's get all these people together to start a festival, but let's not run the festival. We're a DMO. We're not about operations. We're about selling the destination. So that was a really important thing, because you can tend to get really bogged down in some of these production things and lose a lot of money. So the DMO's got to be kept sort of clean out of that. Also, they were adamant about cooperational regionally with other tourism organizations, which makes perfect sense. Governance had to be a nonprofit, independent organization, industry-led, as I said before, should have municipal representation. That was very important too, because the municipalities are going to play a big role in this as well, especially in the first couple of years to make sure that we're on the right track and that we're pushing this ahead and then it's not falling between the cracks. Board should have a wide array of stakeholders on it and clear and timely accountability on the financing side. People thought that it should be partially still financed by the municipalities that are involved, that MAT revenue should be allocated to the DMO. So MAT revenue, MAT is the municipal accommodations tax, which is already in St. Catharines, but I know that there's a question of putting in here as well. Our recommendation is that you do. It's almost a competitive disadvantage if you don't have a MAT in your city now. We're getting requests from all over Canada for people, well, in Ontario it's the MAT, in other provinces it's called something else, but here in Ontario, from the most obscure little towns that want to put in a MAT. So people are realizing how important tourism can be to bring new revenue into their company or into their community. So I think if you don't do it, it's a bit of a competitive disadvantage. At least that's our opinion on it. We wanted to make sure that the shared economy accommodations also participate in that, MAT. And we're seeing that more and more across the country too. Airbnb has gotten sort of a free ride for the last little while, and the tourism industry has been very, upset about that. So the idea is now they are selling bedrooms like a hotel, so they should pay like hotels pay. So I think more and more we're seeing that, and I think a lot of legislation's coming through in different parts of the country. Pay-to-pay programs. Also to generate revenue. So what we mean by that is the DMO comes up with a program advertising the wine country in Quebec. So you pay into it. So there's a base funding that the DMO is going to put into the province. So we go out and say, if you want to be a gold member, it's $15,000. If you want to be a bronze member, it's $5,000, and you get this, and this, and this. But you're part of that one campaign. So it's not a one campaign for all. You need to play. You need to pay to play. And obviously, we're looking at a subscription for membership as well. As I said, we want people to put a little skin in the game. Unique selling proposition that everybody was talking about, again, the authentic experience, the owner-operated. Some people were saying Sonoma versus Napa, which I thought was a cool little comparison. Most wineries in Ontario, so obviously the winery is sort of the hook for the region. Closer to the GTA than some of your competitors down the road. And let's not forget the GTA is the biggest tourism feeder market in the country. So you're well positioned for that. The whole culinary farm-to-table experience, obviously. Arts and culture kept coming up, surprisingly. It took us by surprise, but there seems to be a very good arts and culture scene here. As well, history, obviously Black history, the Welland Canal, Indigenous history. Those all play really well as well when it comes to tourism. Feeder markets, as I said before, let's not try to go all over Hell's Half Acre and try to find clients. We know that they're right down the street in southern Ontario, on some of the border states, and in Quebec. A lot of, especially the winemakers, were telling us that they're getting a lot of influx in from Quebec. That whole sort of foodie, winey thing, Quebecers love that. So that's a market maybe that one had not thought about before for the region here, but definitely one that can be tapped into for sure. We wanted also to make sure that we targeted the right segments, so families, new Canadians, small corporate meetings, because there's no huge meeting facilities, so going after that small corporate meetings. But the good news is there's a lot more of those than there are those huge conferences. Weddings, foodie, soft adventure. When we mean soft adventure, fat bike, trails, canoeing, that kind of stuff. And sports tournaments. I don't have to convince anybody around the room about going after sports tournaments. You've had some locally not too long ago, and it's always a great economic spin-off for the region. So what's the core purpose of the DMO? Well, it's really to build that brand awareness of the destination and promoting the merits of coming here and experiencing the region. And we do that on the leisure traveler. So, you're off on vacation somewhere, you're taking a weekend trip. Travel trade, those are those bus tours that you see every once in a while coming, or individuals that buy prepackaged tours. Corporate meetings, I mentioned before, sports groups and events. Travel media, often forgotten, but the DMO plays a huge role in going after that travel media worldwide. And as I said, on the digital side, that has grown exponentially. So we really need to tap into that travel media, because some of these influencers, surprisingly, have hundreds of thousands of followers that will do what they're told when they're on these online with these people. So very important to tap into that. The other approach is that we have to take a year-round approach. And, you know, Pat and I were driving in from the airport today, and we were saying it's a bit of a long, lonely road until you get to Lincoln. That's when it starts to get somewhat interesting. And then once you sort of actually drive in, then you say, oh, wow, this is really cool. Look at all these farms, look at all these, there's lots to do. So if I'm saying that in the middle of February, just think, you know, we can probably bring in tourism in the winter. We just have to give them the right product and sell them the right experience. So there's really there's an opportunity there. So some of the responsibilities, I said, brand building, promoting the destination, special events marketing. So, you know, if we've taken another big sport event or some festivals, the wine festivals is really marketing those with the partners. Promote membership and partners, marketing through the DMO, create partnership investment initiatives. So as I said before, come up with marketing campaigns that work throughout the year and tap into different segments and different target audiences, and have different partners come in and pay to play. Build those media relations, market readiness. So that's one thing that we don't often think of, but DMOs play an important role in making sure that partners are market ready. So sometimes as an operator, you think you're market ready, but you're not. And it can be the stupidest things. We were working with a client in New Brunswick, and this lady had a wonderful soap shop. And the problem is everybody wanted to go buy the soap, but these buses would show up. She didn't have any room to put any of these people. There were no bathrooms on site, so people were complaining. So instead of selling soap, people were complaining. So not good. You know, that one little thing made a hiccup for the rest of the trip. So those kind of things are what we call market ready. So, you know, the local DMO went in there and explained to her how it should be. So, you know, she invested in her own business, and now she's doing fairly well. Small example. Again, acting as an incubator, not a promoter. Data, super important. I think the stakeholders are asking more and more of that from their DMO, and educate the local visitors, as I said. So when we're looking into the future, how are we going to fund this animal? Well, as I said before, the MAT tax is universally accepted as the very best based funding for any DMO. We're seeing it across the world. Some places they do it better than others. Here in Canada, I think we are probably one of the poster childs for the way we do it. We're relatively cheap in our taxing. Even if you're looking at a 5 or a 6% that they have in some places, if you go to New York City, you're paying about 22% in taxes. And they're all hidden taxes. They're all tourism taxes, but one goes to pay for the convention center, one goes to pay for transit, one goes to pay for blah, blah, blah. Some go to pay for social housing. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. At least here in Canada, we're very defined about how we get that money and where we spend it. The other thing is we're recommending, again, that the MAT be implemented here in Lincoln, hopefully over the next couple of years. Also, I think especially at the very start of this, that the municipalities still stay in the game with the DMO and finance part of the DMO. We've given the town some examples of what a well-run DMO would cost. So there's some ramp up. Funding to do there. We want to make sure that we get out of the gate correctly. It can't be a stop and start. We're going to do this or we're not. Because if you do the stop and start, it's probably worse than if you didn't do it at all. Annual marketing and subscription fees. So again, that pay-to-play model. We want to make sure that partners are willing to come in with a bit of cash, and obviously sponsors and grants as well that are out there. Yeah.
Thank you, John, and thank you, members of council. I just wanted to jump in on this point because I'm sure you're probably asking yourself, and it's not laid out in the presentation, but what does, going back to point 3, what does that sort of skin in the game look like from the municipality? So what we're asking for is $75,000 this year to support the DMO and an additional $75,000 next year, so $150,000 in total, until such time, and it's our full intention that the organization should be predominantly supported by the municipal accommodation tax. As point number 2 says, it's probably going to take us a little bit closer to 24 months to get that up and running, partially because we have to go through the licensing and regulation of short-term accommodations. It was council's direction for us to do that, and we have to get that in place. So that's steps 1 before we move on to a municipal accommodation tax, which would be step 2. In fact, Director Bruder and I were just chatting today. You're going to see some sort of stakeholder engagement with our short-term accommodation partners, probably beginning next month, to start talking about what that licensing and regulation looks like. As John had indicated, the City of St. Catharines started to collect their MAT tax Jan 1 of this year at 2%, moving to 3% next year, and then 4% the following year. And they're proposing doing a 60-40 split, 60% into the DMO from their MAT tax and the 40% towards tourism infrastructure in St. Catharines. At 2%, they're looking at roughly $500,000, and then going up 3%, 4%, so on and so forth. And I know that John's going to talk a little bit about a couple slides on municipal accommodation tax. The point of tonight, of course, is not to dive deep into a MAT tax because we're going to go through the whole process. There's going to be a lot of engagement. Obviously, no decision from council tonight on a MAT tax. We still have to go through that whole process. But obviously, it's key to talk about it tonight. So I'll turn it back to John. I know he's got a couple slides on that. We look forward to some questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Give me a chance to catch my breath. Okay, so what is a MAT tax? Municipal accommodations tax. So it is a tax that is levied at the hotel level on anybody staying in the hotel for the cost of that one room. So it's not levied on food or beverage or any other services. It's really on the room rate. It's being done across North America. It's being done in Europe in different forms. It's really an excellent way. It's a user-generated tax, so it doesn't touch any of the fees or taxes coming out of the city. It's really the user that's, and it's, in my experience, there's always a bit of pushback from the hoteliers, but when they realize that actually it's a good thing, that it helps increase the number of visitors on the long run into a city. I've never known of a city that has gotten rid of their MAT tax. Who can implement it? Municipalities. It has to be in a municipality. It can't be a region. It can't be in some cases in another province, it is a province, but here, in this case in Ontario, it has to be in a municipality. And it has to be a municipality that has a tourism entity with it. So in other words, if you don't have a tourism entity that's promoting tourism, you can't apply for the MAT. You really have to have that tourism entity. So again, making more sense if Lincoln wants to go that way, that the new DMO makes plenty of sense to have that because you have it filtered directly into that DMO. How does it work? Well, once the funds come in, obviously it's collected at the municipal level. It depends. In some cases, we always take Ottawa as the poster child on MATs. They give 100% of whatever's collected back to the DMO. And they've split it up in that 75% of it goes right to the DMO for its marketing purposes, and the reserve of 25 that's put together, put in a pot for development. In other words, for bidding on championships, bidding on congresses, bidding on conventions, needing to help out a particular festival that's getting started. So a bit of seed money, but all of it goes back to tourism in one way or the other. In other cases, it's a 50-50 split. And the thing in the legislation that says there a minimum of 50% has to go to a tourism entity and the other 50 can stay within the municipality. And that's where it gets a little muddy, is that there's no real rules around the portion that stays within the municipality of what it can be used for. Obviously, we like to say it has to go towards a tourism type of activity. But in some cases, some municipalities are just putting it in general funds and it's going to fill potholes, which are not a tourism type activity. So again, the tourism body mostly is the recipient of the tax, and they use it to promote the region. So quickly on what the new organization recommendations should look for. It's a membership structure, so we've given you standard membership categories. And again, this makes sure that we've covered as many of the tourism stakeholders as possible within this, and the municipalities as well. We want to make sure that everybody participates in the tourism story. The project implementation, really the next steps, is really to start with bilateral tri-party agreement between the two cities and the DMO. Look at some bylaws, organizational charts, get a board going, and probably get an inaugural board that would be short-lived until the first annual general meeting, which would probably at this point be appointed by both Lincoln and St. Catherine. So it's really a temporary board to really make sure that everything gets on gear and gets on the rails properly. And then at the first TGM, the election of real and permanent board members go on. In the terms of agreement, really look at the purpose of it, the structure, the governance, how it's going to be funded, super important, and the deliverables, also very important. Always got to tie in the deliverables with that. On the bylaws, I won't go through them all, but obviously we took the ones of the TVTA and put them up to snuff with the idea of a new DMO coming in board. So these are the different categories, so I won't go into all of them. As far as the actual board, the governance and composition, we've got 14 members plus a chair, plus obviously the director, the executive director, which would be ex officio. It's a little bit more than the average. The average in Canada for a DMO board is about 13. Here we've got 14 plus the chair. So, but our feeling on this is that in a new DMO, we're going to need all hands on deck. We're going to need all these different people from all the different industries within the tourism industry on deck. So we feel that it's probably better to have a little bit more than not enough. And we want to make sure that we go get members at large that have specific skills. So legal, marketing, IT, finance, to make sure that we get this thing off the rails in the proper way. What our governance also talks about is terms. So we're looking at a chair. Would be a 2-year term for a maximum of 2 years. We would recommend that chair be not necessarily a tourism person, but maybe somebody within the community that's got a lot of pull, that has done some of these things, that's somewhat unbiased, so that we don't have any particular industry or sector chairing it, but that's just a suggestion. Board members would have also 2-year terms for a maximum of 3 terms. We would recommend subcommittees, so finance, marketing, leisure, travel, trade, and craft brewery. We've put craft brewery in there, and that's very specific to the region, obviously. But those would be committees of 8 members, chaired most likely by somebody on the board, but not necessarily of board members. So really go get some of the stakeholders and maybe future board members. It's great training for future board members, but definitely get members from the industry and the community to be involved in that as well. So a little bit of timeline. We put it into Q1, 2, and 3. We're kind of into it already, but obviously would be to have that service agreement signed within Q1, incorporate the actual DMO and the bylaws, look at that inaugural board. Q2, put that board into place, put a DMO organizational chart into place, so I'll name an executive director and start looking at a first-year marketing plan. Then in Q3, present it to the community through a town hall, elect at an AGM a real board to go forward and initiate that marketing plan, and then start the whole process of collecting data and getting ready for the next year and get an ED in place. And I think that's about it for now. I think the stakeholders will have a few words to say, and then I'll come back up for questions.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And so at this point of the evening, we are going to ask some of our stakeholders to come up and provide some comments on the presentation this evening, but also obviously what this project means to them. So I'm going to ask Mr. Stephen Demore to come up because I know he needs to run to another event this evening. And Madam Mayor, just so you know as well, Justin Downs does send his regrets. He had to teach at Niagara College tonight, so he won't be coming. Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Mayor Easton and Council, thanks for having me here today. So, just going to break it down, put this all together for everyone. TVTA, the pandemic, uncertainty, and lost time. That's what we had. We now have a dedicated team here within the town of Lincoln. We have a new benchland identity, a new DMO initiative, and we've always had a great organic product to make us key players in the tourism sector. So to move forward from there, what we need is constant support and funding. And I'm asking the group here today not to rethink this, to keep putting it off, because if the last 2.5 years haven't improved to us, we don't know what tomorrow's bringing. So we need immediate and aggressive action on this matter. We need constant support and funding so that we can do what we do best. We know that good things grow in Ontario, and what we need to do is have a constant supply of resources so that good things continue to grow and thrive right here in the town of Lincoln. So constant support and funding, and we can be key players in this industry. Thank you.
Are we going according to the list here, or are you,
We're happy to go to corner your list.
yeah, okay, all right, we can do that. I'd like to welcome Norm Beal as well. Okay, Norm, you're not, I'm sorry, Norm, I was just welcoming you. You're not, just have the young ladies. That was my fault. That was my bad, not yours. Because I was just welcoming you because you came in late. Alan Schmidt, now that I've completely offended your colleague, would you please come up? I am going to go by the list. You're 2 up, Norm.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Alan.
Mayor. Thank you, Council. My name's Alan Schmidt. I'm the president of Vineland Estates Winery. I'm the director for the past 35 years and a past chair of the Ontario Craft Winery Association, previously the Wine Council of Ontario. I'm currently the president of the Wine Marketing Association of Ontario. All of that simply to say I have a vested interest in marketing in this region and in the town of Lincoln. Our winery employs about 100 people during our peak season. We are a very large taxpayer. It's very frustrating, it has been frustrating for me for years that I know how much we pay in tax, and if there was a greenhouse on our property, our tax would be about half of that. And I think greenhouses are a great operation. It's just the way that the MPAC applies the tax rating. So I would love some of that tax dollars to be spent in investing in a DMO and in increasing our tourism economy here. I was very skeptical at first about this process, and going to the municipal government and asking them to get involved in running our DMO. Many of you know I've spent the last 35 years lobbying different levels of government to be less involved in our wine industry and get out of the way. I find myself here today now lobbying our municipal government to do the opposite, to continue to be involved to the extent you have been and even further. This investment is really a bridge investment. We are the governance model that has been proposed is one of the best practices. I've been well aware of what's happened in other wine regions in the world. A couple decades ago, Disneyland in Anaheim was the largest tourist attraction in California. It's now the Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley, is double the tourism that Disneyland brings to Anaheim. So I know the potential. I was born and raised in British Columbia. I would say they're ahead of us with tourism, with the winery and food and accommodation, and what it's done out there has been amazing. I got to compliment everyone that's been involved in the process, including the council, but especially the Economic Development Office. It's been extremely inclusive of all of the stakeholders that are here today and many others in making sure that they got our comments, that they were representing our interests, and I was very quickly no longer skeptical of this process. we have a huge opportunity here because our competitors and, our unique marketing proposition here, the fact that we're half the drive from going to Niagara-on-the-Lake. We got more wineries in the town of Lincoln than in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And we are growing from a smaller base, which means it's a huge, much larger opportunity. Niagara-on-the-Lake and Niagara Falls probably can't double or triple their tourism economy. They're probably getting close to, the cap. We can double ours in the next 5 to 10 years or 7 years. One of the things I hear constantly, people coming and visiting our winery for the first time saying, wow, we used to go to Niagara-on-the-Lake all the time, but now it's always so busy down there. We heard about this region. It's so quaint here. There's parking in your parking lot. It's not as busy. So our potential to grow and the uniqueness and the authenticity that's been spoken of already is very genuine with all the tourist operators. So I'm here fully endorsing this and asking for council to do one of we're at the, I wouldn't say the 24th hour now, but maybe the 22nd, 23rd. We've still got a couple more steps to go before we get this board in place, before we get the MAT funding, which I think is brilliant. I have a bed and breakfast at the winery, and that's one tax I will be happy to pay. Many others to the provincial government, I'm not. So anyway, I'm here to I'm here to fully support and congratulate the process so far. It's been exemplary. Thank you.
Alan, would you just say, I've had a request, and maybe it would be easier if anybody had any short questions for us to do them while you're standing.
Sure, absolutely.
Otherwise, everybody's going to be popping up back and forth. So I'm going to turn to Councillor Bernay right now for his short question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Schmidt.
Yep.
So, Alan, you bring up a great point, and it's one that resonated with me when the presenter was at the podium, and it's something we've talked about as a council. Make sure we get out of the gate appropriately. Mm-hmm. And do we want to be Niagara-on-the-Lake? And the message that the presenter gave us about a bus pulling into a soap operation and them not having soap.
Yeah.
It's kind of been my biggest concern. And you just mentioned, and you gave an analogy there about the fact that your parking lot and a lot of the people that are here, their parking lot can handle it. But how do you envision that we throttle this so that growth is appropriate, so that we don't have buses showing up in our boutique wineries that can't handle it, that don't have the bathrooms and don't have the cash registers and the attendants to deal with the people that show up?
So the Wine Marketing Association of Ontario has been very involved in this process so far. One of the things we do at that association is we have a secret shopper program. We invest tens of thousands of dollars in this, that do secret shopping, go out to the wineries and spend a half an hour there, ask a whole list of questions, not from a billboard. It's a secret shopper. And everyone is rated on the cleanliness of their bathrooms, to the welcoming greeting, to how clean the glasses are, to all of those things. There's a huge list, and you get scored and rated on that. It's worked extremely well for our wineries, because a number of years ago we had the same problem. People showing up to wineries and bathrooms weren't working or something like that, or they were walking through mud puddles, and safety issues is another big issue as well. So we would be happy to share that how we do that with the new board and the new Niagara Benchlands, and maybe we can extend that to other accommodations as well.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor, you asked a question specifically about bus tours, and I put it on a list, and I'll do my best to make sure that there's a different type of question asked about that, because I don't think I know where you're going.
So, Madam Mayor,
Go ahead.
if I may, Mr. Dunn would like to answer that question as well.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on a great question, by the way. Couple of things. Visitor management, huge part of DMO, so it's really making sure that we're going again after that right visitors. So I don't think bus tours is really the visitor you want here. But I think that individual, what we call FIT, individual and frequent traveler, those are the ones you want. So the DMO is responsible to marketing to those specific people. So really being targeted on who we go after. And then on the question of, are you ready, is really that education, that market readiness that we work with our stakeholders. So if we know that winery can't handle it, we're not going to send them anybody, because it's detrimental to all the other wineries that are doing a great job. So it's really that visitor management piece.
Thanks very much, John. Thank you, Alan. All right, next on the list is Sue-Ann Staff. Sue-Ann's going to come up and do a happy dance.
Practice something, yes. Madam Mayor and councilors and senior staff, fellow stakeholders, I speak to you today as a past president of the Twenty Valley Tourism Association, as a board member and former executive of the Tourism Partners of Niagara, as president of Sue-Ann Staff Estate Winery, and most importantly, a proud taxpayer of the town of Lincoln. And I want to add, coming from a legacy of taxpayers, as our family's been in this community for 200 years. I want to speak to you today mainly as a winery owner, that there's more wineries in Niagara West than any other region in Niagara or Ontario. These wineries are predominantly here in the Niagara, in the town of Lincoln, as Alan specified. That's why this council needs to care more about us than any other council in the province. We know from the Deloitte Grape and Wine Performance Report that micro to small size wineries, which are wineries that are with revenue of less than $5 million, are highly dependent on events. The smaller the winery, the greater percentage of revenue towards that. The town of Lincoln wineries are consumer-facing, experience-based, and make world-class wines. And for that, we need people to come here. We need them to discover us. These wineries employ locals, contribute to our communities, and pay taxes. These are the exact wineries that were hardest hit during the pandemic and now find themselves requiring the maximum amount of support that's achievable for their survival. Just to quickly review, so remember how bad it was. Retail shops were closed, events were shut down, exports dried up as those markets looked inwards. Restaurants were closed, eliminating those sales. Those are where our sales are. We're not major wholesalers. We're not the Beringers of the world. So we need people to come here to find our restaurants, to find our properties, to find our events, to taste, enjoy, and to live life. Saying that's been a struggle the last little bit is an understatement. Most went farther into debt just to keep on going. We thought when we got to the end of COVID, it'd be the roaring 20s where people would be swinging from the chandeliers and just itching to get out. And that meant revenue. But with higher interest rates, increased inflation, higher gas prices, and a reluctance to travel, that recovery's been very slow. We know that previous DMO models have not worked in this area for a variety of reasons. Lack of collaboration, lack of funds, lack of offerings are things that are at the top of my mind. And this initiative answers all those questions, and it makes it viable. As one of the last active participants in our existing DMO, we've put all our hope and faith into this process and into the Niagara Benchlands. So I commend the town of Lincoln for their substantive efforts to this point. The last 3 years of defining who we are to get to this point has been an enormous initiative, thank you. But now I'm calling you to support it as us wineries are the largest employers in this area. We're large landowners. We're a very large tax base in your town. And it's also going to give us a sense of identity and a name. I can't tell you how frustrating it is being at export shows. I'm off to Düsseldorf, Germany in 4 weeks. And, oh, you're from Niagara Falls. Like, nope, Niagara Falls is here, Niagara Lake is here, and we're over here. And I've never had a proper name for the whole area. And that's where I see this going farther, to support it further. So right now, yes, we're looking at working with the city of St. Catharines, but I see this going further, working with Pelham and West Lincoln to really make it a truly, a truly great DMO. I thought we were looking for $250,000 for a year. Is $75K a year? I think there really isn't a question here that this has to be supported, and I don't think the ask is excessive. Let's support the growth. Let's support our initiatives, a diverse economy, and support the future generations that want to call us home and thrive in tourism. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sue-Ann. And now I'm calling on Norm Beal.
Okay, I have no questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm going to start with, I'm going to try and keep my remarks short. I think Alan and Sue-Ann have done an excellent job of articulating, I think, the issues as they relate, particularly to the wine tourism industry. And both of them have tremendous experience, as Alan, alluded to, been on every committee and every board and every, you name it, that I know of he can be on. So he's been around. He knows the issues. So I'm going to keep it short. I do want to say that the economic development team, Brittany and Paul, have done an absolutely brilliant job on this whole tourism initiative, and the Benchlands theme and the moniker is a great way for us to go forward. I've been supportive of it from the very beginning, as you know, and continue to support it. But we've now been at this pretty close to 5 years. So as Alan said, you know, we're on the 22nd, maybe 23rd hour. I said we're almost into overtime on this one now, and we really got to. We really got to move forward, and we've got to move forward fast. And I'll tell you another reason for that is because we went through 2.5 tremendously damaging years for our sector because of COVID. It's happened. We got some government support that helped out, but that government support disappeared last year. We have not at all nearly recovered from the damage that was done to the tourism sector by COVID. As you know, the federal government didn't even remove the ArriveCAN app until last fall. And we rely on Quebecers, but we also rely on Americans to come across that border, and none of them were coming across the border when the ArriveCAN app was around. So we're still really hurting. Just to let you know, not complaining, just to let you know, we're still hurting, and we really need to launch some serious tourism initiatives in this part of Niagara so that our wineries and our restaurants and everything else that's related to the tourism sector can really start to recover and prosper again. So I put that on the table right now. We need to move quickly. We need to move so that we can recover quickly. And I think we have the template. I fully support the concept that you've heard here today. I think it's the right way to go. That it's a tried and true method that has been proven out before. I don't really think you want to start tinkering with it too much. It's an effective tool that we all can use. And I'll just close by saying, you know, the wine industry specifically in the town of Lincoln generates about $3 million a year. I mean, I know they say $3 million a year for the tourism sector in Lincoln, but I think that's pretty much centered primarily on the wine industry. That's an investment we make in municipal taxes, but I can tell you and Alan will say this because I know their budget's $5 million a year alone at the Wine Marketing Association, and every individual winery in this room or in the town of Lincoln probably spend a significant portion of their marketing budgets on tourism to drive economic activity here in the town of Lincoln. So there's an exponential increase in the amount of money that our industry is spending to benefit all of the citizens of the town of Lincoln. I just want you to remember that when you're, as Sue-Ann, I thought it was a $250,000 house too, Sue-Ann, so I'm a little bit confused. $75,000, I mean, for what a small investment for such a potentially huge outcome. So that's really all I have to say. I'm sorry I rambled on longer than I wanted to, and I appreciate your time and your support going forward. Open to any questions.
Thank you very much. I don't see any at the moment, but you never know what might come up. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ellen, for coming and for your comments. And next we have Matt Giffen.
Thank you, Mayor Easton, Council, Town of Lincoln staff. You know, it's an honor to be here because this is so really critical to our tourism industry here in the Town of Lincoln. I've been very fortunate as a former member of the Twenty Valley Tourist Association Board to have a front row seat to witness Paul, Brittany, Floor 13, Council, come together and collaborate and you know really realize that we needed to change what we had. It was good, but it was outdated, and it's time to change, time to improve. You know, we've I think longingly looked at Prince Edward County for the longest time and said, wow, they are massively punching above their weight. You know, all you need to do is look around here and see the amazing wineries, the incredible culinary destinations, the agriculture, all the great things that we have to offer. And, you know, I'm biased, but, you know, there's an opportunity there, clearly. We can do it, and we need the support from everyone. I must admit, I reiterate what my fellow speakers have said. 75 grand. What? That's crazy. I thought, like, is that the first month? Just seeing what we had and the opportunity to shine a light on all the great things we have and pull those people off the QEW as they're going to Niagara Falls for their one-day visit. Let them know that wine country is Lincoln. It's Niagara Benchlands, not the other one, and that's critical. The data speaks for itself. The jobs created, the tax revenue that it comes from our industry. It's pretty much open and shut. If you're worried about your constituents, well, you can just point to that, I think, pretty clearly. So I think that's it from my perspective. As someone who's recently reinvested in the community with our event space, I'm so happy that this partnership includes St. Catharines. We need that accommodation piece as part of our value proposition. This is smart. I think we all knew it was the right thing to do. I couldn't be more excited. That really elevates our game, and that was one of the differentiators that people would say Niagara Lake versus Lincoln. Oh, accommodation tough. Let's just go to Niagara Lake. That takes that away, and we're learning that firsthand right now as we're booking events that we've never booked before. So, anyway, thank you. That's it for me. Any questions, or I can leave? Okay, I thought Norm was going to ask me a question.
As the questions come forward. Well, next we have Heidi Fielding. Step up, Heidi. I could spend an hour on the wonderful awards that everybody gets in this room that's coming up and speaking to us tonight. That in itself would be a book.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councilors, and friends and colleagues. The benefit of going last is many of my points I wanted to say have been met, so thank you, Paul, for putting my name last. I just want to say, in short, I so appreciate the work that has gone into this project. Really, truly, I feel you nailed it, so great job. I love all the collateral. I loved everything I have seen. I feel so proud as a business owner to actually stand behind the Niagara Benchlands brand. That is not easy. That was a true task that they had in front of them, and I think, wow, like we have such a great opportunity here. It is much needed, and I go back to Matt's comments about Prince Edward County. Darn it, it drives me crazy every time I see an ad or a commercial or something in a newspaper. I've been there, and we have what they're talking about, but we do it ourselves, and as everyone said, we are authentic, and it just grinds my gears when I see anything from them. I know these endeavors do take time, and I appreciate that. As we have paused sort of on the 20 Valley tourism end of things, we are really behind the 8 ball. We have all seen a decline in traffic since we thought, again, the floodgates were going to open, and we were honestly ready. And I don't mean ready like a tour bus ready. I mean, we were just ready to re-engage our customers, have them come back to us. But it's been slow. It's been slow across the summer, the fall, and of course, the winter. So I know we need to work together to get this going again. I speak for our winery. I don't need the town of Lincoln to do all the heavy lifting. We are obviously willing to participate in a pay-to-play. But gosh, let's get that sign up on the QEW and let people we are here know that we are here and that we are the Niagara Benchlands, and there's things to do in our area because it's desperately needed. Talking about the bus tours again, we have a different customer now. Since COVID, people are like, do I need to make a reservation? Can I bring more than 6 people? Can I bring my dog? Like these are the questions we field all the time. So as a winery that really can't take bus groups, we inform them about that and we tell them what we can do. And I think everybody does a great job on that. Some can't and some can, but we all work together and promote each other. So that's all I have to say. Let's get this thing rocking, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much, Heidi. Now, I'm going to ask Stephanie Hicks to come up. Stephanie is the interim executive director I want you to come up for a reason, Stephanie. It may not be compared to your presentation, but I want you to be standing at the podium when I make a. Stephanie's the interim executive director of the Twenty Valley Tourism Association, and she's the executive director of the Downtown Bench Beamsville BIA. The reason that I want Stephanie to stand here is because council will all remember that in 2014, but really before that, the BIA was really struggling. And we made a big decision that we were going to provide some bridge financing or bridge money or however you want to. We were giving them an envelope, a small envelope of money that was going to carry them through a period of time. And I think that anybody that knows anything at all about the BIA and how it's functioning and the contribution that it makes to the downtown businesses in Beamsville, you will understand that in this community where people have a really tremendous work ethic and know how to work together, that it is a low risk to provide the kind of financing that's being requested that's going to come through later in the budget. So I didn't mean to make an example of you, but I do want to make an example of you because you're a great partner, and I really think that you and the work that your organization does exemplifies how it is that we feel that I guess that we have the nerve, the staff had the nerve to put forward the idea that the council would consider bridge financing. So I want to put that on the table because it's very, very important. And thank you very much, Stephanie, for being such a great partner. And I think it's great that you're also fulfilling this interim role because you do bring a lot of talents to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I make a quick comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Since I would like to speak on behalf of the stakeholders here and on behalf of the downtown, because tourism is certainly a part of our downtown. Tourists travel through our downtown. We're the bottom of the bench, we're the downtown core. It was one of the actual comments we had when we were looking at expanding our catchment area. We had a prominent business that was going to end up paying a higher levy. And his one comment was, I get tourists here all the time. They make a pit stop. So they're the ones making the stops in our downtown. So tourism is on the forefront of our BIA. We have our strategic planning happening this year. And our tourism company has taken the whole tourism strategy and they're dissecting it and seeing what they can put forward for our BIA. And then also I just wanted to quickly comment again, prior to my BIA world, which I've been in for 8 years now, I was 14 years in Niagara Falls in the dog-eat-dog world of hospitality and tourism. Coming here, I think there's so much potential to invest in tourism and to make the day trip to Niagara Falls, but the stays happening in St. Catharines and Lincoln. That's all.
Thank you very much. Paul, I didn't really want to hijack, but like you, sometimes we have to include things that are important.
That's not.
I have a question of you now.
Sure, and if I may, just before that question, Madam Mayor, and I thank your comments, and actually I was going to close with, members of council, the last time I stood up in front of you and said, and put, my, to a lesser extent, my integrity on the line, and say we need to get a third-party organization up and running to help better the community. It was the BIA, so I'm glad you highlighted that, Madam Mayor. And I'm going to go a little off script, but I just want to highlight one additional comment. I know there's some criticism out there that myself and my department focus a little too much on tourism, and we don't focus on industrial or anything like that. And I'd say that's not necessarily true. I mean, we do focus on industrial, we do focus on other elements of our economy. However, I hope it's been quite clear tonight that tourism represents our greatest opportunity for economic growth and job creation in Lincoln, which is why we focus a lot on trying to get this organization and tourism up and running, because it is, as I said, the best opportunity to create wealth in this community. So with that, I thank our stakeholders, I thank members of council for listening tonight, and at this point, we're at the Q&A session. So Madam Mayor, over to you.
And Karen, I would appreciate it very much if you would come up and say a few words on behalf of the City of St. Catharines. And I do that on the strength of the memorandum of understanding that we have in place that is still current and will be current until the new Board of Governors is sworn in. So please come to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate that. Thank you, everybody on staff and council. The City of St. Catharines is extremely proud and excited about the opportunity to work with the town of Lincoln in this capacity. We have been partners around the Tourism Partnership of Niagara sub-regional table for a long time. JD, you and I go back to that. We've shared funding that way. We've had that organic relationship for a very long time. Putting this together in a more formal capacity allows us to share resources. It allows us to go after funding that requires match funding that we combined can go after more money. We both have very modest budgets and big dreams. So it's a lot easier to do that when we work together. We have a very natural complementary set of attributes between the two jurisdictions, which is great. And as someone has mentioned earlier, the visitor does not know where Lincoln ends and St. Catharines begins, and this is the way to transition people between our municipalities seamlessly and extend that experience. So we're very excited about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen.
You're welcome.
All right, I would like to also recognize two things. In the package that you've received, there's a number of letters. I want to thank everybody that submitted those letters of support. And there are a few businesses here that are not, that don't fall necessarily into the sectors that you're representing. So that's also very good because they obviously understand the multiplier effect. I also want to recognize the industry, the entire industry, whoever you are, that would fall into the category of being a tourist destination or supporting tourism, for the creativity and the alternate investment that you've made, and just the sheer grit that you've applied to the last few years. We can't thank you enough. We wouldn't be having this conversation if you hadn't been prepared to make those investments and to just keep grinding it out, and that's what you've been doing. So we'll move on now to the questions, and we'll start with Councillor Brunet. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to the presenters, I'm wondering if you, obviously, when Mr. Deaney gave you the introduction, he said that you guys have been doing this for a long time. You've done it in a lot of areas. So I'm just wondering, I believe it was Sue-Ann's staff made a comment, and I couldn't agree more, and I hear it from a number of residents. I hear it from some Airbnb and some bed and breakfast proprietors when they say, you know, really like the idea that you've got this joint destination marketing going with the City of St. Catharines. But why is it limited to the City of St. Catharines? So I'm just wondering, through you to the presenter, if you could kind of elaborate from your experience with all the DMOs you've worked on, the flexibility that's built into this as we move forward to grow this. It's great that we're doing it with the City of St. Catharines. It's great that they're bringing to the table the things that we don't have with accommodation, and hopefully we can bring the things that they don't have. But what is the flexibility built into this to bring in, exactly like Sue-Ann said, a Grimsby, a Pelham, a West Lincoln?
Go ahead,
Good question. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I can tell you more horror stories about communities, and one a couple of hours up the road here, a region who can't get their act together, and they're splitting up their DMO into a bunch of little things that are going to end up being a big fat zero. So I think the idea of the two that are so willing right now, there is no reason why you couldn't keep graphing on more people, but I think maybe the right idea is to get it on the rails properly, get the whole thing functioning in a really stealth way, and then maybe start looking at other regions, unless they show up with a big fat check, and then there's another conversation to be had as well there. But I think if you start with at least the two that are willing, they've got, you know, like St. Catharines has got a lot of things already in place. They've got the mat, they're ready to rock. So I think now is a question of getting Lincoln up to that level, and then you can start maybe going to some more.
If I can add to that, Madam Mayor, and through you to the councillor. So great question, and it's our full intention, us in St. Catharines, to be the founding members of this organization. But the idea behind our tourism strategy was to look after other public sector partners that might want to participate. And let me tell you, they're seeing what we're doing. They're knocking on doors already asking, saying, hey, listen, how can we participate? You know, what are you guys doing? And we're happy to have those conversations, but I think the founding partners wanted to come together first. And I think Mr. CEO wanted to add a comment as well, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. CEO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. So, councillor, great question, I think, as everyone's highlighted. And I can tell you next week we've got a meeting with Niagara-on-the-Lake to talk about that very issue. It's interesting that we highlight Niagara-on-the-Lake. They're the first ones to reach out and say, so what are you guys doing around tourism? We'd love to talk to you. We're hearing it from Pelham, and we're hearing it from Grimsby. So I know Paul and I, Matt and I, a number of the senior leadership that's here in the room are talking at Grimsby about a lot of shared services, and this is definitely at the forefront of that. So we're already, I think, seeing the excitement or the interest that some of them have, what that results in. I think, of course, let's get the foundation there and let's move forward. But, to your point, we're already seeing them call us and figure out how can we kind of pay to play with you.
Madam Mayor, can I just ask one more question? I see all the mics are lit up, but if I could just ask one more question?
Go ahead.
Through you, I don't know who to direct this to, maybe to Mr. Deanne or to anybody that wants to answer. So I say this tongue in cheek. It's almost like everybody came here with an orchestrated question. What do you mean only 75,000? And I know that we're all here to promote tourism. But when I look at this chart, it brings up questions. And anytime you start an organization, you start off and you grow it. And I couldn't agree more with the questions that have been articulated today and the concerns today that, we signed this partnership in October of 2021. We're now in the spring almost of 2023. So, we have a sense of urgency here, but my concern, and it's not a concern that I don't want to support tourism, but when I look at this chart, we start off with an ED, and then we have a marketing manager, then we have a sales manager. So $75,000 morphs into something pretty quickly. So I'm not sure who to direct it to, anybody that wants to jump in, but in the first year, maybe the second year, do we see something like marketing and communications being handled within the municipalities, or are we going right out of the hop and hiring, for staff?
Mr. Deanne?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and through to the councillor, and again, great questions. And I assure you, the commentary around budgetary wasn't pre-planted questions. I think the comment to them was this is a net new ask. We have some additional base dollars to support, but to go to your question. No, we don't want it to balloon. I mean, part of the reason why I think, Mr. Dunn laid out, 5 or 6 elements in terms of how you fund this organization, it needs to be as much as possible self-sufficient and self-sustaining. We do need to come to the table, and that's why I'm saying predominantly this organization needs to be supported through municipal accommodation tax. What you're referencing, Councillor, and I think everyone else has in front of them as well, is what does a proper DMO have when it comes to funding? And I think there's a 5-year period, and we're definitely not going out with the gate with 4 staff. An executive director does need to be in place, and I think, as you saw from the presentation, we're earmarking Q4 of this year. But that's another reason why we're coming with St. Catharines. I think if I came to you and said, members of council, I need $600,000-$700,000 to run a DMO, I'd be showing the door as quickly as possible. But the idea is as long as we have a partner in St. Catharines, and the same for them to us, we can pool resources, we can pool sort of staff to help support the organization and get that up and running.
That's great, and I appreciate that response. And Madam Mayor, if I could just make one final comment. So I know the shareholders are all here, the stakeholders are all here. I don't know how much they're following our budget procedure, but we also do have an ask in front of us from the Economic Department for $90,000 to support wayfinding. That sign that Ms. Fielding was talking about, the Todd sign on the highway that still says TBTA, and some digital signs, some banners. So we do have a $90,000 ask in front of this council in addition to the ask that we're here to talk about today. So those are all things that we've been deliberating. So I just want to make sure that that is fully open and transparent. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like, in the interest of transparency, I would like to make it clear that I am employed with the Ontario Craft Wineries and the Wine Marketing Association of Ontario. As tonight is a workshop where we're hearing the presentation, I'm participating only in that. And when it comes time to make those decisions and voting, I will refrain from doing so.
Councillor Murray, do you have a question that you would like to ask? I have so many questions. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to, I'm not sure if it would be Mr. Deanne or Mr. Dunn or Brittany. And I apologize for coming in late. Work comes first. If this was covered in the first part of the presentation, forgive me, but there is mention there of KPIs and measurables that are going to be used for success measurements. Are those going to be delivered to us, or can you give me a brief overview of what they might be and how we're going to measure against them?
Yeah, in the document, we mentioned that there should be a plan, an actual business plan every year, and those KPIs would be in there. But also the KPIs will be set by the board as well on a yearly basis. But as an example, it could be anything from visitor growth, economic impact, overnight stays, development of new product and experiences. So there's a bunch of different KPIs that we can look at. Obviously, in a startup, we're a little bit more lenient on the KPIs in the first couple of years because we really need to build that clientele. But yeah, definitely, I would recommend that they must be in place.
Okay, so through you, Madam Mayor. So we're not expected to have them for year one. Obviously, it's going to be very generic. It'd probably be just increased traffic, increased sales, revenue, all those type of things. Will we be getting if this does go through, are we going to be getting updates on those, or at least some form of validation of how things are going? I'm not sure if it can come from stakeholders or if it comes directly from Paul, or if you want to get some insight on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Great question. And the idea would be that we would have the board of directors of the new organization providing these KPIs, and ideally we have a yearly presentation to council on the work that they're doing on behalf of the sector. Things that we would look at as well is how are we increasing that visitation when it comes to accommodations. We can look at data and see how many people are spending nights in Lincoln, and we would be able to present that. If those numbers are going up, obviously we're seeing some success. But in addition, obviously, we would look to the organization to set what those KPIs are, and Mr. Dunn identified a few that would be part of that. So we would for sure be coming to council.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
There'd be a great dependency on our partners here too to help collect that data. So if they're seeing more visitation, they have to tell the DMOs that can come back and say, okay, we're seeing more visitors. It's not anecdotal, it's actual hard numbers.
Just quickly, Councillor Russell, as well. Let's not forget that we currently have live the Niagara Benchlands channels as well, which we are actively measuring, reassisting, A/B testing, failing fast. So as we look at the growth in the absence of the DMO until we create new digital channels and have these metrics of success, both my partners in the City of St. Catharines and I will be using our foundational brand equity right now in the channels that we have at our disposal to continue to share with Council the success of that brand investment, some of the activities that we're also doing to help set the stage for the destination. So those KPIs as well will be coming from us regularly from the town staff perspective as well.
Thank you very much, Brittany. Councillor Timmers.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Wow. I'm excited today to be here. This is fantastic. Paul, Brittany, fantastic work on this, and to our consultants and all the stakeholders that are here tonight. I joined the TVTA as a council rep about 7 years ago. And I'm going to be totally honest. I knew so little about tourism, although I lived in Lincoln my whole life. And I had no idea what a DMO was. And today I have a good grasp of what it is, and it certainly is the way to go. It's where we need to go. And I can't wait. I hear the stakeholders, their comments. Let's get it done. Let's get going. Because I see nothing but incredible growth for all of our businesses. When they find, we're like a hidden treasure that no one knows about. And Heidi, Prince Edward County's got nothing on us. When we get discovered, we're going to be on the map. And, you know, the Niagara Benchlands, I'm so thrilled. And I'm to constantly be promoting it out there and telling people, we have more than Niagara on the Lake. Like I've said that so many times. You know, people have no idea what's here. But anyway, I'll get back on track. So I do have a question around the DMO, and I think I've asked this before, just around the partnership, and I totally get the partnership. I'm totally supportive of it. But when we do the MAT tax and with St. Catharines, how do we divide that? Are we dividing that equally? Like I foresee them having perhaps a lot more MAT tax than what Lincoln will. So if you could just maybe answer that briefly, Paul, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you, Councillor. And, maybe I'll start that. So I did mention earlier on in the presentation that, the City of St. Catharines is starting their MAT collection as of Jan 1st of this year at 2%, then going to 3% next year and 4% the following year. They envision that, I believe at 2%, it's going to bring about $500,000 in. And their proposal is to put 60% into the DMO, 40% into tourism infrastructure, or as John said, roads and potholes. And so, the idea would be, as John indicated, I think legislation sort of states that you have, at a very minimum, put a MAT tax, 50% towards the DMO, and then the other 50 could be used for something else. And so, as I had mentioned, that we're going to go through a whole consultation, a whole process to develop a MAT tax here in Lincoln, and we look forward to engaging with our stakeholders to say, what should we be putting into the DMO? What should we be putting towards other infrastructure projects related to tourism? So St. Catharines knows what they're doing. We're still working on ours.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for that. I only asked that question because I know that's a question that residents are wondering and wanting to understand more about. So as a council, I feel we absolutely need to support this. I support it 100%. And I don't have any more questions. Thank you, Maryson. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We'll move on now to Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Mayor Eason. I had one question that Councillor Russell stole my thunder already, and you answered that, so thank you very much. But I'll make a quick comment. Thank you, staff, Paul and Brittany, for this presentation, as well as presenters. Thank you, John. I didn't drift during your presentation, John, but I did a quick self-examination. And this is a workshop, so we are supposed to learn a lot here. And so someone who's been here, as Lynn has mentioned, her whole life, I've been here my whole life, this tourism thing creeps up on you. So, and my wife and myself, in the beginning of our married life, we'd have friends and family come visit us, and they came to visit us. And now you don't realize it. You're thinking while John's presenting, they come here, they have ulterior motives. I don't really think they want to visit us anymore, but it's interesting because they say, well, yeah, we're coming over, we'll stay for night, but we heard about this place, we'll go there for dinner, or let's grab a drink here, or let's do a wine tasting there. And you don't realize it, but I'm just looking back at our last, 6 months or 8 months of having friends from out of town, and it's kind of mind-blowing in a way. Even locally, I think we did a pretty good job of supporting local during the COVID, trying to keep all of our dollars here. And it just, what's transformed, and a lot of times I actually in the industry I'm in, my 1 foot is in some of that indirectly, doing a lot of work there. You don't realize it until we have an evening like today, how much of an impact it is on this town. And so, yeah, thank you very much for that. Thank you to the presenters, and thank you especially to our stakeholders. They took time out of their day and they let us see their passion, which is pretty cool. It's always nice to see business owners and entrepreneurs, small business operators to be here and let us know what's going on. And to staff again, Paul and Brittany, you guys did, and the rest of your staff, this has been a great exercise, and I've learned a lot from it. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Eason.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Pachariva.
Thanks, Your Worship. And Heidi, you couldn't be more true about that Prince Edward County comment. We were driving back from visiting our son and his wife in Gatineau on Monday night. And you're outside of Kingston, out in the middle of nowhere, and you see this sign, and then it pops up 160 kilometers to Toronto. And I'm thinking to myself, why the heck are people going there? They should be coming here. It's a heck of a lot closer. I've lived that, so I know it, so you're preaching to the choir, but thanks for saying that. Question to maybe Paul. So when the tourism partnership was established, they knew that you couldn't promote 12 individual municipalities. So they looked at three, South Coast, Niagara-on-the-Lake, and Niagara Falls, and then St. Catharines, and this point now, Niagara Benchlands. And two groups partnered up because the funding was based on rooms. So of course, Niagara Falls got the vast majority, but identified back then that this relationship had to work. And to Councillor Brunee's point, you need to start somewhere, right? So with the two, and then the thought is, okay, if you're doing something right, to come on. So is that still the mantra behind that group?
Yes, a great question, Councillor. And so just for everyone's edification as well, I mean, what the Councillor is referring to is the TPM, which is the Tourism Partnership of Niagara. So they're our regional tourism organization. The province has, I believe, 13, and we're regional tourism organization number 2. So what they do is they get a pot of money from the province to support tourism in their districts. How they split it up is basically based, as the councillor said, based on DMOs throughout the Niagara region. Us coming together with the city of St. Catharines, the hope is that we'd be able to go and get some additional allocation from the Tourism Partnership of Niagara to support our joint destination organization or our destination. And so there's conversations currently happening on that. And so the idea is, again, pooling resources, trying to get more of that piece of the pie.
Okay. And second question around Airbnbs. And again, having traveled around to various sporting events and tournaments throughout the province, and that's just, it's cost of doing business. You know that DMF is going to show up on your bill. I mean, we were at the lacrosse championships for University in Peterborough. Peterborough charges it. Windsor charges it. Sault Ste. Marie charges it. So not to be in that game, you're missing out. Correct? Okay. And okay. And I know that the kind of sticking point between the major hoteliers and the others was they were paying that, but it wasn't being collected through Airbnbs. And are they now embracing that they will collect based on the rooms in the municipality and then submit that? So again, it levels the playing field. You're either all in or you're not. And I think that was the dividing line before, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a convoluted story. As you know, Airbnb came into the market and they weren't collecting anything, and there weren't the safety and security measures that you would find in a hotel, so the hotels pushed back. A lot of the major centers came right out of the gate and said, okay, we need to legislate this. They have to level the playing field. So a lot of the big cities jumped in right away. The problem now is that a lot of the Airbnb, the company itself, won't necessarily collect the tax on your behalf unless you have a certain size of collection pool. Okay. So if they said just for Lincoln, they'll say, no, it's too small and
exactly.
It's too much. I mean, it's going to cost us more than we're going to make from you.
Yeah.
So it's really looking at how a region can do it, or a province, or in certain cases, a province or a region, yeah. The country hasn't done it because it's a provincial legislation. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so more and more we're seeing that happening. And now actually Airbnb's gone out to a lot of these large regions and says, okay, we'll do it. Just pool your gang together and so we can do it.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor. And next is Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you very much, Mayor Easton, through you to the presenters and members of the audience. I just want to thank all of you for coming. Heidi's Domes, I've been there several times. Sue-Ann's Winery, Matt's place, I was there yesterday. Unfortunately, it wasn't open, but no, I support all of your, your local businesses as much as I can, both me and my wife and my friends as well. And I do consider tourism to be extremely important, and especially now following the pandemic with the changes in consumer behaviors, especially with our American friends. The question I have through you is, there's a cost to this, and prior to myself being a counselor, like 75 grand is not a lot of money, but in reality, it's an extra 0.4 or so % increase in the levy. So the question I have is, we're looking at providing this seed money to get the ball rolling. What happens? What's our business plan in terms of recovering that money through the MAT tax? How many? What's our plan? How many rooms are we anticipating, or how many hotel providers are we anticipating that will be remitting MAT tax? And I ask that because, like, the municipalities, the presenter in this sheet, they're Hamilton, Barrie, Waterloo. These are larger municipalities. They're not 25,000.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Miklik. Councillor, I think it's worth noting that the viability in 50% of Lincoln's current accommodation inventory currently sits in our short-term accommodations sector. So why the importance of our current short-term accommodations licensing is so important as a first step to this project is we're actually holding 15% of that room inventory, in Lincoln currently with those operators. We do have 50% of traditional accommodations. You'll see them quite clearly. And on the 20, the Beacon, Jordan House Tavern, which account for the other 50%. Why the MAT tax collection is important, and you'll see some of the opportunities in front of you where we've ran the math on 2%, 3%, a 4%, and 5% collection rate. Right now, if we were to aggregate that sector, based on the numbers that we have available at our disposal, at absolute bare minimum, at 5%, we're looking at bringing close to $440,000 of economic revenue into the town of Lincoln to be split with the DMO. Now, how we go about divvying that up in the future, I can tell you right now that that far exceeds my current overall tourism operating budget for the town of Lincoln annually. So without that, I think commitment to at least exploring MAT, working with our planning team and bylaw team on reforming short-term accommodations here in Lincoln, we have a great opportunity to aggregate that sector, and also at the dutiful responsibility of our local owner-operators in STAs, so our short-term accommodation providers, our B&Bs, to also actively promote them and put them on the world stage, just in line as we do with our traditional accommodation partners at Inn on the 20, at the Beacon, and at the Jordan House as well.
Thank you very much.
You know, one of the things, yeah, it isn't a disbursement for sure, but at the same time, it goes into promoting, so bringing in more visitors. And if we can bring those visitors in year round, then that business would be open when you go in the middle of winter, hence spending more money in the city, possibly increasing the number of experiences, people deciding to open new businesses, more revenue for the city. So it's kind of like a bit of a snowball effect. Yeah, it's more of a long-term or medium to long-term effect to get the actual dollars back in the pockets of the city, but I think it's a good investment to put in the first place.
Thank you very much. And if I may, another question, just...
Go ahead, Councillor.
So with regards to, through you to the presenters, like with regards to, I was a member of 20 Valley Tourism when it first started, and it started out with the greatest of intentions, and Sue-Ann staff would know, and those would know. It started out with the greatest of intentions, and so is this. The question I have is, and our friends, our neighbors in St. Catharines are wonderful, and we're very fortunate to have a great working relationship with our friends in St. Catharines. What worries me is what happens. What's the exit plan if this should not work out? If there's differences of opinion, differences of direction, thoughts that this isn't working, it's too skewed one way and not the other, and how are we benefiting, and members of the community all of a sudden start questioning, what would be an exit plan?
So through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, and before I answer that, councillor, I just want to go back to your original question for a quick second. The slide deck that, or the table that Brittany was referring to is on page 4, and it does have, some MAT tax revenue assumptions, and Brittany made sure I had to stress assumptions, at a 5%, 4%, 3%, and 2% in terms of what Lincoln would bring in. This math was done on a 50% occupancy. So we can see through software and data, such as AirDNA that we're looking at, that roughly our accommodations in Lincoln are occupied at about 50% most of the time. There is a lot of room to grow there. And so those numbers could change, which is also the reason why we are working from an economic development perspective on attracting more accommodations to our community. With our friends in planning, Director Boudreau, we're working on some accommodations on Ontario Street and some other portions of our community as well. And so that's partially the reason why we're trying to attract more accommodation investments into the community. In regards to your second question, Councillor, and you would have seen in the slide, so next steps after we get some approval is for us to sit down with our friends of the City of St. Catharines to write a service level agreement, so an SLA, to really identify what this partnership entails. To answer the question succinctly, we're not going to let it fail. But at the end of the day, we're going to have that service level agreement to really identify who does what we're bringing to the table, and of course, putting forward the plan in terms of the Board of Governors, the directors, the bylaws, and all that sort of stuff.
Thank you for that answer. I just I feel the need to ask that question. I don't know anybody that jumps into a relationship that hopes or thinks it's going to fail. So that's why I asked that question and make sure that we're cognizant or aware of that, just, when negotiating.
And I think that's why I stressed earlier the idea of having an industry-led nonprofit. I think if the industry's behind it, it's going to make sure it doesn't fail, for sure, because it's their bread and butter, right? So,
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Njima.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This question is for Mr. Deanne or Brittany. So we spoke before, and my understanding, and forgiveness, I was here later because I have to work as well, but that we can't start collecting the MAT tax until we have our licensing, short-term accommodation licensing in place. So how far along are we on that? How close are we to having that ready?
Through you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for the question, Councillor. So I did mention earlier, and so what we're doing right now with our friends in planning, Director Bruder and I were just talking about this actually today. We're going to start to work on some public engagement when it comes to licensing and regulations of short-term accommodations, and we're actually going to hopefully start that next month. And so once we do the engagement, then we can come back with council or to council with recommendations on how we can move forward. That's step one. Until we have that in place, we can't do to step two, which is the municipal accommodation tax. But it's our intention to go to step two.
Okay. Do we have a timeline for getting that licensing process done? I know public engagement is coming up. Any idea when we'll be ready to pull the trigger?
Well, hopefully shortly thereafter, after public engagement, but we're going to send council a letter or information report to basically lay out what those steps and timelines are. So hopefully shortly thereafter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I have a quick question, Paul, and it has to do with the ongoing relationship. Once the I don't know what the $75,000 payback is going to look like. It probably will look like a lot of things, but when we get to the point where where that's been achieved, what is the relationship between the town and the DMO? Is it an arm's length relationship? Does it have any kind of a reporting relationship at that point? The numbers that I'm seeing would dictate that it stands alone. We also don't know what that investment could be coming from the TPA or TPM. So what does that relationship look like when things are all copacetic?
So thank you for the question, Madam Mayor. And we're creating a third-party arm's length organization that is industry-led. As Mr. Dunn had indicated, once you have the buy-in from the private sector, we're going to make sure this thing runs smoothly. And we have that buy-in. I think you've seen it tonight. But we are proposing to have a seat at the table. So the City of St. Catharines would have 2 seats, 1 council representative, 1 staff representative. And we would have the same, 1 staff representative, 1 council representative on that board. I think it's a very important point that the DMO would come to council on a yearly basis to talk about the activities that they're working on. And that way you can see that, we're getting value for money, quite frankly. And so I think that would be the relationship.
Okay, and is it premature to ask what the overall first impressions have been from the TPM?
In one word, positive. Yeah, they like what we're doing, and they're very supportive of this process, and they like the fact that we're coming together with the City of St. Catharines to do this. But overall impressions and first commentary are very positive. I don't know if Brittany wants to say something as well, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, if I just may come to the table with a proof of concept of the TPN's current confidence in our relationship with the City of St. Catharines to bring forward value to West Niagara. Just recently in 2022, we actually teamed up on a joint application with our partners in the City of St. Catharines to ask the TPN for just shy of $100,000 in matched funding to help support asset and development in our destination. That was unequivocally met with an overwhelming success, and we actually received $97,000 to support that project. Now, you will see those great assets coming into play not only last year, but as well here in 2023. And we do have continued opportunities, again, with the TPN. In fact, we've got a current an ask sitting in front of their board for decision tomorrow, actually, with regards to another $50,000 ask to potentially once again support even increased enhanced marketing capacity for a great destination. So, Madam Mayor, if that's any proof, and the continued success that we're having is just a leverage for us to continue to keep our foot on the gas and keep going.
That's great. Thank you very much.
And one more thing, Madam Mayor. We were able to secure last year a $100,000 check from the TPN to purchase holiday light decor. So you may have seen in Jordan Village, at the museum, we had some holiday decor up. In addition, at NPCA to support Winter Wine Fest and the Holiday Light Trail, we had some lights up out there. So you're thinking, big tall Christmas trees, polar bears, those sort of things. The intention is for those to go back to Jordan Village post the improvement project. But that's $100,000 that we wouldn't have had before. So not including what Brittany just added, it's a good chunk of chain that we've been able to get from the Tourism Partnership of Niagara. They're very supportive of our destination. They like the value proposition that Lincoln has when it comes to culinary and beverage, and so we are one of the shining beacons.
That's great. That's a significant endorsement. I'm going to go now to Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Deanny. So, Paul, I just couldn't let this question go by. Councillor Rinjama asked you a question about the MAT tax, and I certainly appreciate your response. But there was an article that appeared in the paper a couple weeks ago. Wouldn't be the first time we've been misquoted, but in the newspaper it did state that we had not started the the process, and that you had indicated you were coming to council to support funding. And that you were quoted as saying that you didn't think we would be starting the MAT tax until late 24 or early 25. I know that launched a few questions in the community from people questioning, council supporting this, moving forward. It also, developed some questions from some of our Airbnb and our bed and breakfast. So just to be clear. You've heard today, obviously, from the stakeholders. We've all been impacted by COVID, and let's get the rag out and let's get moving. So, are things moving from that article to where we stand today already in the 2 weeks that have passed?
Good question, Councillor, and a little bit of a misquote there, but we're starting. I mean, as I had indicated, we need to do step one, which is licensing regulation, and then we can move to step two. I mean, doing step one helps us do step two a lot faster. But it takes time, especially to collect, right? So once we have the process in place, it takes time to collect some of that revenue from a MAT tax. We want to do it much faster than obviously 2025. But the idea would be as quickly as possible we start to collect that MAT tax. But it behooves us, and I think we saw it in St. Catharines, we're seeing in other jurisdictions, you got to do the education. You've got to have a good plan in place to implement that MAT tax and how to collect it and where it goes and that sort of stuff. Once you bring everyone along for the ride, there's going to be a lot more buy-in. Once you show the value proposition of why we want a municipal accommodation tax, but we want to move as fast as we can.
And I appreciate that, Madam Mayor. I just think it's important. We're pivoting here after 6 o'clock, and we're going into budget. There's people watching this on YouTube. I just want to make sure that the expressions are clear, and our expectations are as well for us, for the stakeholders, and for the residents. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Paul, would you just for clarification, then, the whole policy around licensing? Obviously, if people aren't licensed, then they're not paying their MAT tax. So what's the timing for the licensing policy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I tried to answer that a little bit when Councillor Regime asked that question, but we're starting engagement next month. And then, shortly thereafter, we want to start bringing a recommendation towards council. And so we're probably by the end of next week or the following, we're going to send council a memo that will highlight in terms of what the next steps are and what we look at. So we're going to send that fairly soon, which will lay out some timelines as well. So stay tuned for that. But the idea is we're going to start engagement as quickly as possible next month.
So is it necessary to have that entire policy in place before you begin the MAT tax so that everybody's operating on the same playing field?
It is important to do that step because you need the licensing and the regulation in place before you can actually bring in the MAT tax. So it's an imperative step one and one that council actually directed us to do. And so we're fully supportive behind it, and we'll provide more information on what that looks like.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm going to Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to ask another question. Just with regards to the collection of the MAT tax, I'm not sure how other municipalities do it, or what like when I'm looking at the estimated operating budget, there's managing director, marketing manager, et cetera. Who will be ensuring that the MAT tax is collected? How is that? Is it an honor system? Do we have to have bylaw enforce this? What resources from the town staff would be required to ensure this is collected?
So through you, Madam Mayor, there's a lot of, and this is what part of the process, what we're looking at in terms of investigating how other municipalities do it. And there's a variety of models out there, Councillor, in terms of how they collect the MAT tax. Most municipalities do it internally. Some actually put the resources into the DMO and have them collect. So it's all things that we're looking at. You know, we look forward through the process to you know, investigate all options and provide a recommendation to council that will, you know, impact our taxpayers as minimal as possible when it comes to municipal accommodation tax and how to collect that. Most people do it on a net revenue basis. Anything you collect before anything goes out to a DMO is cost neutral. You cover the cost of collection of the software. If there's requirement on staff, you cover that cost before anything goes to a DMO. But all things that we're going to look at, because we want to make sure that before we come back to council with a recommendation on MAT tax, we look at all possible avenues and what it is.
Okay, thank you.
We're good for time at 6:03. And that's the end of the questions. So I want to thank everyone. Thank you very much, Paul and Brittany and John and Pat and everyone of our stakeholders that came this evening, and all of you that presented, and for everyone who wrote letters of support. Very, very important. Things have certainly come a long way. And it's very encouraging to hear the degree of hope that all of you are expressing, but you're also being very clear about the importance of speed ahead. All right, so thank you again, and I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers. The council receive and file as information the workshop presentation regarding building a strong visitor economy for Lincoln, a collaborative approach to developing a joint destination marketing organization. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
Vote is now open. Okay, some of you are not logged into the eScribe app, so I'll ask for a show of hands. Those in favor? And those opposed? And that carries.
Thank you. The motion is carried. Thanking everyone for attending this meeting, the evening this meeting. And I want to thank particularly Karen Doyle. Please go back and tell Mayor Cisco that everything went swimmingly. Great, thanks very much for coming. And there being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 18:05 p.m.